You know, over the past several months of being quarantined, board games have become very popular once again. Sales of games such as Monopoly and Clue and Scrabble, some say have increased by 4,000% sales. And that was as early as April. Families were looking for things to do at home, and board games seem to have the answer, as well as doing puzzles and other things as a family. Honestly, there are two things I don't like about board games. First of all, you can't play them alone. What am I going to do? Play Monopoly against myself? I don't know. Secondly, there are too many rules. Whoever reads all the rules in the package of a board game? But of course I'm kidding, because every game has to have rules. In Scrabble, one of the rules is that you can't just make up a word. It has to be a real word, and there's even a Scrabble dictionary to make certain that your word is valid. In Monopoly, if you land on an opponent's property, you have to pay rent. You just can't choose not to pay. In chess, there are rules which govern the way the pieces move. You can't simply move a piece wherever you want. So there are rules for every kind of game, because rules mark the limits of play. They set boundaries which keep games from becoming chaotic. Rules also keep the game moving forward to a conclusion to determine who wins and who loses. You know, sometimes people treat religion as if it was a game, and that you're simply kind of moving forward on the board. Sometimes you go backwards, but the goal is to cross the finish line, to get home, to get to heaven. Some think that religion is just a bunch of rules. If you follow the rules, you'll do well and move forward. If you don't follow the rules, you'll get punished and you have to go back 3 spaces. Some people try to make up their own rules, and others just hope they could get away with breaking the rules. It kind of seems to me that the Apostle Peter in today's gospel had this idea that all he had to do was to follow the rules in order to win the approval of Jesus. Peter knew, and he had heard, that Jesus always preached about forgiveness. Jesus was big on the subject of forgiveness. He often preached and taught about the value of forgiving other people. But Peter apparently would feel more comfortable knowing the rules. How many times? Peter's a realist. He knows you just can't allow people to take advantage of you and hurt you. He knew that sometimes it was necessary to draw the line and say no more. But where do we draw that line? Peter wants Jesus to explain the rules of the forgiveness game. He wants to know the limits of forgiveness. He wants to know the boundaries. Peter thinks he knows. You know, in Jewish culture, the number 7 was regarded as the perfect number. If you want to do something perfectly, do it 7 times. Peter comes up with his simple rule. We can forgive someone up to 7 times. After that, there ain't no forgiveness. Now, Jesus knows that Peter is playing this kind of game, unknowingly, but Jesus wants to make several points. He has several rules to discuss. If Peter wants to really understand the game of forgiveness and how it works, there are a few things he has to understand. Jesus makes his point by first telling a parable about a man who was forgiven a huge debt that he owed to his master. The master was merciful and compassionate in writing off the entire debt. But that same servant refused to give a much smaller debt that someone else owed him. He lacked compassion and mercy. And when the master heard that his own servant, who he had forgiven, refused to pass it on, he revoked his forgiveness. And he had the man thrown into jail until the debt was paid. In telling this parable, Jesus is offering some rules of play for forgiveness. The first rule: Forgiveness is always in play. Jesus knows where Peter is coming from. He understands the number game as well as anyone. He understands the number symbolism. So he plays it with Peter. Not 7 times, Jesus says, but 77 times. 77 times means every time. Jesus' answer makes it clear. Forgiveness is always in play. It has no limits. Every time somebody offends or hurts, we are to forgive them. Now, this view really seems to fly in the face of common sense. If we continue to forgive people, isn't there a chance that they will just keep hurting us, taking advantage of us? If we continually forgive somebody who hurts us or abuses us, does that mean we're saying it's all right for them to do that? Aren't we condoning that behavior? The answer is no. Forgiveness does not mean we're saying a wrong act is right. Forgiveness does not mean we have to stay in a relationship that is hurtful or harmful. Forgiveness simply means we choose not to retaliate. It means we're not going to let the offense consume us with our own anger. Forgiveness is a choice we make, not to return in kind the hurt we have received. The second rule that Jesus offers, forgiveness must come from the heart. The parable makes it clear. Jesus is not just talking about paying lip service to someone by saying, I forgive you. No. Forgiveness has to come from a movement of the heart, which finds its ground in compassion and mercy, maybe pity for the person who has hurt us. In order for forgiveness to be genuine, it has to be offered with a loving and compassionate heart. Again, it's not enough to simply say, I forgave that person, but still harbor ill feelings towards them. If forgiveness is truly forgiveness, the kind Jesus speaks of, it has to be given with a sense of compassion and mercy. There has to be something within us that compels us to forgive out of pity or care for the person who has hurt us. And the third rule that is evident in this parable, forgiveness creates forgiveness. True forgiveness, the kind of forgiveness that God offers us, must bring about change. Jesus seems to expect forgiveness to change people's hearts. But whether or not a person receives our forgiveness is, it's not up to us. We can only forgive. And if the person accepts that forgiveness with gratitude, then he or she will be truly forgiven. And it should cause the person who has been forgiven to become more compassionate and merciful themselves. However, in this conversation with Peter, Jesus is not offering new rules, really, about how to offer or receive forgiveness. What Jesus is doing in the parable is describing what forgiveness truly is. Forgiveness is an act of the will. It's an act of the heart. If we offer forgiveness out of love, then it is really given. If we are forgiven and we have fully received the effects of that forgiveness, we will be filled with a sense of relief and gratitude. And the person who has been forgiven should pass that forgiveness on to other people. Most games end with a win-lose outcome. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. But with forgiveness, Jesus presses for a different kind of outcome. Jesus offers us some guidelines that allow us to experience a win-win outcome. Nobody loses. With forgiveness, everybody wins.
Nice.